It wasn't supposed to mean anything. That's what I told myself the day Sophie first walked into my auto shop. Her car made a strange knocking noise, and she was just looking for the nearest mechanic who could squeeze her in. She later admitted her regular shop was booked solid, so she took a chance on mine. To me, it was just another customer. Another job. I had no idea that routine moment would turn into the beginning of a story that would change my entire life. I remember wiping the grease from my hands when I greeted her. She stood there in her work blazer, clearly on her lunch break, phone buzzing every few seconds with emails. She had this presence about her, confident, sharp, like someone who knew exactly where she was headed. I fixed the issue quickly, replaced a couple of loose parts, and had her back on the road in under an hour. When she paid, she gave me this quick smile and said, "Not bad for a small shop." I laughed it off, not realizing that would be the first of many conversations. We exchanged numbers, business. At first, she said she might need help with maintenance in the future. But texts about spark plugs turned into texts about weekend plans. Calls about tire pressure shifted into late-night chats about family, work stress, and little jokes only we understood. Somehow, against all odds, Sophie and I grew close. Dating her felt surreal. She worked at a mid-sized tech firm. Always polished, always in control. I was a small business owner, covered in oil stains more often than not. But she seemed drawn to that contrast. She told me once that I grounded her, that I reminded her of a world outside corporate boardrooms and performance reviews. Back then, it felt like love was enough to bridge any gap. When marriage came into the conversation, I thought we were unstoppable. I had no doubts, but the first cracks appeared before we even walked down the aisle. Sophie's parents weren't subtle about how they saw me. Her mother especially made it clear I was just a mechanic. Her father didn't openly criticize, but the silence in his eyes was heavier than words. At family dinners, I could feel the weight of their judgment. Every question carried a hidden jab. "So, how's the little shop doing? Are you keeping up with the bigger garages?" I smiled through it, told myself their opinion didn't matter. Sophie loved me. That's what counted, or so I thought. Even then, I should have realized how much influence her family had over her. They did everything together: weekend get-togethers, group vacations, constant calls. I believed her love for me would outweigh their disapproval. But looking back, that was my first mistake. I underestimated how tightly her world was tied to theirs. We went ahead with the wedding anyway. The ceremony was beautiful, simple, nothing extravagant. I stood there watching Sophie walk down the aisle, thinking I had won, thinking love alone could silence the doubts echoing in the room. For a while, it seemed like I was right. We moved in together, settled into our small home, and life was calm. I ran the shop, she climbed the corporate ladder, and we came together at night to share meals and stories. The routine felt safe, almost comforting, but every time we visited her parents, the tension returned. No matter how polite I tried to be, I was never more than the man who fixed cars. Their disapproval was like a shadow over every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. Sophie would shrug it off, saying, "You don't have to love them. Just tolerate them. We don't live with them." I nodded, told myself I could swallow my pride for her sake. After all, marriage was about compromise. What I didn't know then was that compromise can slowly turn into silence. And silence can eat away at love before you even realize it. That was how it all began, the love story. The tension, the invisible cracks no one saw. At that stage, I still believed we would overcome it all. I still believed Sophie's heart was fully mine. But the truth was already shifting under my feet. At first, I thought marriage would make us stronger. For a while, it did. We had our little routines: coffee together in the mornings, late-night TV shows, weekend errands. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. But as Sophie's career began to accelerate, I noticed the balance between us start to shift. Her first big promotion came about a year into our marriage. I remember being proud, genuinely proud. I even surprised her with dinner reservations at a fancy steakhouse downtown and a bottle of her favorite Cabernet. That night, we toasted to her success. She smiled and said, "We're just getting started." And I believed her. I thought her victory was our victory. But with that promotion came late-night emails, early morning conference calls, and business trips that ate up our weekends. Slowly, the time we used to share disappeared. I'd make dinner and end up eating alone. Our bedtime conversations shrank into a few distracted, MMHMs, while she scrolled through her phone. I told myself it was temporary. That once she settled into the new role, things would go back to normal. But normal never came back. With every new project, every new recognition at work, she seemed less invested in us and more invested in everything else. I wasn't jealous of her success. I run my own auto shop. And while it's not glamorous, it pays the bills, covers the mortgage, and keeps food on the table. I always saw us as a team. But she began to see us as two separate players. She even started making comments like, "You should think about expanding your shop. Other garages are doing more." They weren't suggestions, they were comparisons. Little cuts that built into bruises. The subject of children came up more often during our earlier years together. We both wanted a family. Or at least that's what we said. But when Sophie started experiencing pregnancy symptoms, and we rushed to the doctor with nervous excitement, everything changed. After running the tests, the doctor gently told us that Sophie wasn't pregnant. It was disappointing, but what followed hit me harder. The doctor asked about Sophie's lifestyle, her work hours, her stress levels, her lack of sleep, with a calm but serious tone. He explained that her body was under too much pressure. Stress like hers could make it extremely difficult to conceive. We left the clinic in silence. I thought that moment would open her eyes. That she'd finally admit she was pushing herself too hard. But on the drive home, instead of reflection, she was back on her phone answering emails. By dinner that night, she was already buried in work again. Like the doctor had said nothing at all. Days passed, and she never brought it up. Not one change, not one conversation. I kept waiting, but the silence was louder than words. Eventually, I decided to say something myself. One evening, I carefully asked if she was planning to adjust her schedule, to slow down so we could give ourselves the best chance at starting a family. Her reaction was explosive. She accused me of trying to hold her back, of being threatened by her ambition. Her words cut like glass. "My parents were right about you. You're not aligned with where I'm going." I sat there stunned. What started as a hopeful talk about children had twisted into an attack on my character. I wasn't trying to compete with her success. I just wanted us to have a shot at building the family we promised each other. But in that moment, I realized she didn't see me as a partner anymore. She saw me as a weight. That night marked a turning point. I stopped bringing up children. I stopped trying to fix what she didn't even admit was broken. And yet, the silence between us kept growing. We weren't a couple planning a future anymore. We were two strangers sharing a house, pretending nothing was wrong. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just a rough season of marriage. It was the beginning of something much darker. After that explosive argument about children, something shifted in Sophie. It was as if she had flipped a switch overnight. The woman I had married, who once found comfort in simple things, quiet dinners, evenings on the couch, suddenly became obsessed with appearances. She started dressing differently, spending hours in front of the mirror before leaving the house. At first, I thought it was just part of her professional image. A woman in tech trying to look sharp in a competitive environment. But it didn't stop at work. Even when she said she was just meeting friends for drinks, she dressed as if she were attending a gala. Perfume that lingered for hours. Makeup flawless. Dresses that left little to the imagination. I wanted to believe it was harmless. That she was simply taking pride in herself. But the pattern became undeniable. She was going out more often. Always with her so-called work friends. Always late. Always vague about details. Our intimacy, already fragile, dissolved almost completely. Nights once filled with laughter and closeness turned into cold silence. She would roll over in bed, phone in hand, screen lighting up her face as she typed away to someone I didn't know. When I asked who it was, she'd brush me off. Just a colleague. Don't be paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The real confirmation came one night when she came home late, claiming she was exhausted from work. She showered quickly, changed into her nightwear, and climbed into bed. Her phone buzzed while she dozed off. Screen still glowing. Out of instinct, I picked it up. The messages were all there. Romantic emojis, late-night plans, mentions of hotels and our secret spot. And the worst of all, her replies, promising him she would divorce me soon. My chest tightened as I read through the thread. It wasn't just flirtation, it was an affair. Full-blown and ongoing. She wasn't even conflicted about it. She had already chosen him. I sat there in the dim light of our bedroom, staring at the proof, my hands trembling but my face strangely calm. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't wake her. I didn't shout or demand answers. Instead, I did something unexpected. I took screenshots of everything. I saved every single message, every word that betrayed our vows. That was the night I stopped being a husband trying to fix a broken marriage. That was the night I became a man preparing for war. I started keeping track of everything after that. Every cold shoulder, every disrespectful comment, every late night she slipped out with excuses too thin to believe. I wrote it all down, date by date, like a soldier keeping a log. At first, I considered confronting her, but I knew better. If this ever went to court, feelings wouldn't matter, proof would. And I was determined that if she was going to humiliate me, I'd be ready to face her and her family with evidence that couldn't be denied. But gathering evidence wasn't easy. Sophie was careful, or maybe just lucky. She deleted conversations often, kept her phone close, and made sure her stories lined up. Still, the signs were there, unexplained receipts, perfume that wasn't hers lingering on her clothes, a new energy in her voice whenever her phone buzzed. One night, I suggested counseling, a last attempt to salvage something. Her response wasn't just rejection, it was cruel. She snapped at me, her voice cold. "Why would I waste time in therapy with you? You're the problem, Daniel. You've always been the problem." I recorded that conversation, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew the battle ahead would be brutal, and I needed every weapon I could carry. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to her breathing beside me, I realized the truth. My marriage was already over. The only question left was how I would end it, and whether I would let her destroy me in the process. After I had gathered screenshots and recordings, I thought maybe I had enough. But deep down, I knew it wasn't solid. Courts didn't care about feelings. And Sophie's family was ruthless enough to twist the story if I showed up with nothing more than text messages. If I was going to protect myself, I needed proof no one could deny. That's when I hired a private investigator. I remember sitting across from him at a diner just outside town. He was older, calm, and professional, the kind of man who'd seen everything. I slid a folder across the table with what I had, screenshots, dates, small notes I had written. He nodded, barely reacting, and said, "If she's cheating, I'll find out." It didn't take long. Within a week, he called me. His voice was steady, almost too casual for the weight of what he had uncovered. "You might want to meet me in person." When we met, he placed a small flash drive and a stack of photographs on the table. My heart pounded as I flipped through them. Sophie wasn't being discreet anymore. There she was, in broad daylight, holding Eric's hand outside a hotel near the interstate. Another photo showed them laughing over dinner, leaning in close, eyes locked, and the final set, grainy but unmistakable, captured them walking arm in arm into a hotel room late at night, and leaving hours later, disheveled, smiling. The flash drive held even more. Video clips of them kissing in his car, parked at a lot not far from her office. Sophie, the same woman who used to tell me she was working late, was tangled up with him, looking happier than she had with me in months. I sat there, staring at the evidence, and felt two emotions at once, devastation and clarity. Devastation because this was the final nail in the coffin. Clarity because now I had exactly what I needed. There would be no debates. "No," he said, she said. The truth was caught on camera. From that day forward, my plan shifted. I was no longer trying to save a marriage. I was preparing for an exit, and not just any exit, but one that would make sure I walked away with my dignity intact. I called a lawyer I knew from a client at my shop. We met in his office, and I laid everything out, texts, recordings, photos, videos. He leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "You've built quite the case," he said. "With this much evidence, she won't have much ground to stand on." Together, we filed for divorce quietly. Right before Thanksgiving, papers were drawn, my signature inked, ready to be served, but I didn't rush it. I waited, because I knew what was coming. Sophie thought she was in control, planning her dramatic reveal with her family by her side. Papers ready to humiliate me. She believed I was clueless, the mechanic husband too blind to see the truth. But I was ahead of her. And Christmas, the very stage where I had always been looked down upon, would become the stage where I finally exposed her. I could already picture it. Her handing me the divorce papers with a smirk. her family laughing at my expense, and then me, calmly pulling out my own gift. Signed documents, photos, screenshots, videos, proof undeniable. For years, they had treated me as less than. But this time, in their own living room, I would show them who Sophie really was, and who I had always been: loyal, patient, and prepared. By the time Christmas came around, my marriage to Sophie was already over and everything but paperwork. We played our roles in public, smiling for photos, pretending nothing was wrong, but behind closed doors, the silence between us was unbearable. Every year, we spent Christmas at her parents' house. For me, those visits were always a reminder that I was the outsider, the man who never fit their image of a son-in-law. This year, though, I wasn't walking in as a victim. I had come prepared. Christmas morning arrived. The living room was warm with laughter, wrapping paper scattered across the floor, and her family sipping coffee while exchanging gifts. I sat quietly, watching, waiting. Sophie was unusually cheerful, almost glowing with confidence. She moved around the room, handing out presents, then finally stopped in front of me. She handed me a neatly wrapped envelope, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't kind. "This one's for you, Daniel," she said. I opened it slowly, though I already knew what it was. Divorce papers, freshly filed just days earlier. As I held them in my hands, her family erupted in laughter. Her mother clapped, her father smirked, and Sophie stood proudly, as if she had just won all along. Bitter war. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I looked up at her and said calmly, "That's funny. I got you something, too." I reached behind the chair and pulled out a small black gift box. I handed it to her. And for the first time that morning, her confident smile wavered. She unwrapped it slowly, her fingers trembling as if her instincts already knew the storm inside. When she opened the lid, the room went silent. Inside were my own signed divorce papers, dated before hers, along with printed photographs of her and Eric together. Photos of them at the hotel, holding hands in public, caught in embraces they thought were private. Beside them, screenshots of their late-night messages, her promises to leave me, her declarations of love to another man. And finally, a small flash drive. I leaned forward and said, "You might want to watch that when you're alone. The videos are even harder to deny." Her face drained of color. Her family, who had been laughing only moments before, sat frozen, their expressions twisted in shock. The smugness evaporated from the room, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I stood up slowly, my voice steady. "You all thought I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't what you wanted for her. But I was loyal. I gave her everything I had. And this," I pointed toward the box, "is how she repaid me." No one moved. No one spoke. Sophie clutched the box like it was burning her hands. I took a deep breath, looked around the room one last time, and added, "We both got what we came for. I'll see you in court." Then I turned, walked out the front door, and left the house behind me. The cold December air hit my face, but I felt lighter than I had in months. For once, I wasn't the man humiliated. I was the man who had faced the truth, prepared for it, and walked away with my dignity intact. Walking out of Sophie's parents' house that Christmas morning felt like the end of one chapter. But as the cold winter air hit my face, I knew another battle was just beginning: the courtroom. Sophie didn't crumble after I exposed her. If anything, she became more aggressive. Within days, her lawyer contacted mine. She was determined to fight, to twist the narrative, to paint herself as the victim. In court filings, she claimed I was emotionally distant, unmotivated, even lazy. She tried to argue that I had failed as a husband, that I couldn't keep up with her level of ambition, and that my resentment had driven her away. Reading those words, I almost laughed. It was the exact script her family had been whispering for years. But here's the thing about truth: it doesn't bend to spin. When the hearings began, my lawyer presented everything. Screenshots of messages where she promised Eric she would divorce me. Photographs of them entering hotels together. Videos of them kissing in his car. Then came the audio recording of Sophie herself, rejecting therapy and blaming me for everything. Piece by piece, the facade Sophie had built crumbled. Her lawyer objected, tried to dismiss evidence, but it was airtight. The judge listened, expressionless, but I could see the weight of the proof landing heavily. Sophie sat there, arms crossed, her confidence slipping more with each exhibit. When the judge finally spoke, His words were clear. The marriage had been undermined by her choices. The evidence of her affair was overwhelming. And then came the part that cut deepest for her. Because Sophie earned significantly more than I did. And because the divorce was rooted in her misconduct. The settlement favored me. Assets were divided. And she was ordered to provide financial compensation. For once, the power she and her family had lorded over me turned back on them. She was furious. Outside the courthouse, she confronted me, her words laced with venom. "You'll regret this. Daniel, you think you won, but you destroyed everything." I looked at her calmly and said, "No, Sophie, you destroyed it the moment you chose him over us." Then I walked away. The weeks that followed were chaotic. She left angry voicemails, long texts full of insults, accusations, and desperate attempts to provoke me. I didn't respond. I blocked her number. That silence, the same silence that once hurt me in our marriage, became my shield. And when the dust finally settled, I had time to breathe, to reflect. Losing Sophie wasn't easy. You don't spend years building a life with someone and walk away without scars. I mourned the marriage we were supposed to have, the family we promised each other. That grief was real. But beneath it all, there was peace. Peace in knowing I hadn't let her or her family destroy my name. Peace in knowing I had stood up. Not with rage, but with preparation and truth. For years, they had treated me like I was less. But when it mattered most, I proved I was more than enough. And for the first time in a long time, I walked forward with nothing left tying me down. Looking back, I realized this story was never just about betrayal or divorce. It was about dignity. Sophie thought success gave her permission to belittle me, and her family believed money defined worth. But when the truth came out, it wasn't wealth, status, or clever lies that mattered. It was loyalty, patience, and preparation. The lesson is simple. When someone betrays you, you don't need to match their cruelty. You don't need to scream, beg, or lose yourself trying to fix what's already broken. Stand your ground, gather your truth, and when the time comes, let the facts speak louder than their words. In the end, respect is not given, it's proven. And sometimes, walking away with your dignity intact is the greatest victory of all.